So it's officially been 2 years since we moved out here, and that's how long it's taken us to get established enough to add morning milking to our daily chores. This is exciting for us because not only does our family go through a ton of milk, but I really want to get into cheese and soap making as well. I feel like we've learned so much about goats over the past few months with kidding and milking, but we still have a lot more to learn. Fig and Fern were the first 2 goats we brought home to us. They were unregistered Nigerian Dwarf half-sisters that we picked up from a family nearby. We didn't think it would matter that they were unregistered, we just fell in love. Fig produces the sweetest milk I've ever tasted in my life, but she only gives about 1.5 cups, which is on the lower end as far as milk production goes. Fern, on the other hand, has a lovely udder for milking and produces about 2.5 cups. We were worried her milk wouldn't taste as good at first because before we started separating the kids at night, it had kind of a goaty flavor. But now her milk tastes nice and sweet. Together they give us 1 quart of milk in the morning. They'll probably double that once we wean the kids in another month or so and start milking in the evening too. But to give you an example, a Nigerian Dwarf that has good dairy genes can produce nearly 1 quart of milk from one session on its own. And when you're milking day in and day out, and you're spending lots of money on hay and going through lots of milk, you start to realize that putting effort into improving the dairy characteristics of your herd is a form of honoring your own time and energy. Luckily, when we brought home Willow, Aspen, and our buck Thomas last year, we made sure they were registered goats from good dairy lines. Aspen is due to kid in another 1.5 months or so, so it will be interesting to see if there's a major difference between her dairy genetics versus Fig and Fern's. To some degree, I think it's always going to be a matter of luck. Mabel's babies are going to be a month old this weekend, so we're going to start separating her from her kids at night and milking her once a day in the morning too. Although she's a cashmere goat, cashmere itself isn't a breed, but rather a characteristic. All goats produce cashmere, but she was bred to produce more of it. Mabel and her brothers are actually made up of many different goat breeds, some of which are dairy goat lines like Cobra Hosley. From what I can tell, she has a really lovely dairy skin and a nice soft udder, so I'm curious to see how her milk compares to Fig and Fern's. Nigerian Dwarfs have the highest butterfat content of all goat breeds, so I don't expect it to taste as good, but we'll see. One of the reasons we go through so much milk in our house is because Matt and I drink a ton of coffee. As you know, we love our espresso machine, but we also really like cold brew because it's so rich and chocolatey. I'll post our method for making this up on the blog if you'd like to check it out. Matt likes to just mix his cold brew with milk, but I like to pour mine over ice and sometimes add a little maple syrup. It's delicious. So in my last video, I talked about my plans for dyeing my handspun with onion skins. And now I'd like to take you along and show you what happened. First, I separated out my yellow onion skins from my red onion skins. I did this because I often get very different results from the red ones than I do the yellow ones. I decided to just use the yellow ones for this project, so I put them in my dye pot and covered them with water, and then I put them on the stove, brought them to a boil, and reduced the heat to low for a few hours before turning the heat off. Once the dye liquid had cooled, I strained it out into a bigger dye pot and added my yarn. I pushed the yarn under the water level with a spatula until it was fully submerged, and then I put it back on the stove and simmered it for a few more hours. This is what it looked like after that. So the color actually looks to me a lot like a yellow onion skin. It was really pretty, but I can never leave well enough alone. So I decided to get out my iron water, which is just a jar of water that I threw some rusty nails into several years ago. I think there's a little vinegar in there too, but I can't remember. Anyway, I put the dye pot back on the stove and got the water nice and warm, and then I added a splash of the iron water. You don't need much iron at all. A little goes a long way. And within a short period of time, you can start to see that the dye liquid darkens and that the outside of the yarn is starting to darken as well. Fast forward 15 minutes or so, and the yarn color has completely transformed. So at this point, I went ahead and strained out the yarn into my colander and let it cool to room temperature. I rinsed it and squeezed it and rinsed it and squeezed it a few times, and then I soaked it in a wool wash overnight. I didn't mean to let it go that long, but I forgot about it, which is fine. And then the next morning I strained it out again, rinsed it, squeezed it, and then I hung it up to dry. It took about 3 days, and then it was ready to wind up. So now I just need to figure out what I'm going to make with my first hand-spun naturally dyed yarn. I'm hoping I can think of something useful, maybe a hat for one of the kids or something.
Hold it up.
There's one green, there's blue one over there. There's another green. Oh my. You put an egg up there. One here. Another egg. That's it in here. Here's one.
Yay!
Hey, there's an egg over here. How can that? There's another one in the tree. Over here. No, I'll get it. Oh, yeah! There's loads of red eggs.
Yay!